Good morning, my friends. This is Paul, and as you probably guessed from the title of this video, this is going to be yet another praise of the composer of the wonderful puzzle platformer Evergate. But before I begin, I just want to make the quick disclaimer that I was not paid, sponsored, or endorsed to say any of what I'm about to tell you guys. This is 100% me. I'm not making a profit out of this video. I don't even make pennies for the YouTube videos I make, so everything I do is entirely for your sake and also partly for mine. So this is entirely 100% me. I'm not being paid to say any of this, just in case you were wondering. So the other day I was on Twitter and I was looking at one of M.R. Miller's tweets. That's the composer of Evergate, just in case you didn't get the memo. And Evergate was nominated for yet another award for its soundtrack. And so because I follow M.R. Miller, and he follows me, funny enough, I said, wow, I really want to get that soundtrack, but I lack the funds and the means of listening to it. So rather cryptically, he responded, this isn't word for word, but more or less he just says, I think you should check your direct messages. And sure enough, he, just out of the blue, he sent me the entire soundtrack of Evergate so that I could listen to it on my computer. And I was blown away by this because, yes, it is true that I had said for the past year, like, I really want to buy the Evergate soundtrack. I really hope I can get it when I have the time and the availability. But I didn't actually ask him to actually send it to me free of charge. So then I started to wonder if maybe, like, oh, he probably saw that my birthday is April 20th. I got this on April 2nd, which is Good Friday this year. So I wondered, okay, is it because Easter is coming up and so the soundtrack wanted to sound heavenly? Is it because my birthday is on April 20th and he wanted to give me an early birthday present? So I asked him that in the Twitter message, and he just responded, yeah, you could call it that if you want to, but just think of it as a friendly gesture. Like, how many people do that? If this were Nintendo, they probably would have wanted some kind of profit, or they would have wanted something in return. Like, if we give you a free game, you got to do a review of it, and you got to say all these things. He didn't say any of that. He was just like, enjoy. So, this is why my respect for indie companies is growing rapidly as the years approach. I used to not be a huge fan of them because their games could be so hit or miss, but man, M.R. Miller is really getting me to rethink how these teams work. Now, you guys know in the past that I actually praised Mr. Miller for finding my review of the original Evergate and actually commenting on it, which is the first time I've ever heard from an industry insider, if you can call him industry. Because I feel like indie developers are more of just passionate gamers that happen to know how to make actual non-illegal games. And I already made a video expressing how amazing it was that he actually responded. Like you get people like Nintendo, again, who fans try to give them feedback, and sure, they might read it, but they won't acknowledge it. They won't say, like, yeah, you guys kind of have a point. Pokemon Sword and Shield was a bit lazy, so we'll try to make it up to you guys. No. They just kind of hope that the money does the talking. Whereas he actually said, like, yeah, I see your complaints about the game, and I'll tell the team about it so maybe they can make some improvements. That's the kind of stuff I like to hear from the gaming industry. So this time, he sent me the soundtrack without any kind of repercussions and out of the kindness of his heart. I don't even have words to express how joyful I am. Well, this video would be rather pointless if I didn't talk about the soundtrack itself in a video praising the composer for sending me the soundtrack. So, the closest thing I can do to describing how Evergate's soundtrack sounds like, just in case you can't hear the music good enough in this video, is it kind of reminds me of the symphony called The Planets, where each piece of the symphony is based on one of the planets in the solar system. Another way of comparing it is, it kind of feels like it feels very heavenly, honestly. I know that might sound cliche coming from a Catholic, but it's honestly true. Like, when I listen to Evergate, it does feel like half of me is in heaven already, and like I'm already kinda sorta with the Lord in eternal paradise, as opposed to having a strained relationship with the Lord because sinful nature does that to you. So it fit perfectly with the theme of Good Friday being the day that Jesus died on the cross, but also that his death was like what saved us from our sins. And not only that, but the soundtrack just has a wonderful amount of consistency to it. Now, there are songs that are vastly different from others. There are pieces that are more calm and sweet, like a lullaby, but then there are also more intense trumpet and heavy violin pieces. And I can't really think of too many songs that were even just good. Now, granted, I'm not a huge fan of synthesized pieces, but I'm not going to blame the composer for that because there's a level late in the game that takes place in futuristic New York. So I'm pretty sure most of you that have seen a lot of neon lights and big city streets will be like, yeah, that doesn't really feel suited to a full orchestra. But apart from that, every piece was at the worst great and at the most phenomenal. Like, you may be impressed with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for, at the moment, currently having 1,018 songs and still growing as the DLC approaches. So Ultimate may beat this out in quantity, because this game only has 36 songs, but there were some songs in Ultimate that weren't very good, and in some cases they were flat out awful, like if you take 25M, you know, the theme song for the first level of Donkey Kong. But there's not even a song that's only decent in here. All of them are at the very least great. And I would say that this may be even more consistently awesome than even Banjo-Kazooie's soundtrack. And I never thought I would say that, because Grant Kirkhope is like a legend. So if this doesn't make it into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate in some form, I really hope maybe the next Smash Bros. Game will consider even just adding one piece from this game. That would be incredible. So, if you're not a video game fan, you might be wondering, well, the soundtrack may be awesome, but should I actually buy it? I think it depends on how much you like orchestra pieces, because I think with the exception of only 3 songs, all of them either have like a music box type quality, like Professor Layton's soundtrack, or they're performed by a full orchestra. However, if you're not a fan of orchestras, I think you might still get a lot out of the very surreal, heavenly type experience that feels like you're in a whole nother world. And even if you're not a fan of video games, the context, it doesn't really take away too much from the soundtrack. Like, my mom's not a gamer, but I showed her samples of this game's music, and she thought it was mind-blowing. And I even tried describing it to my non-gamer dad, who generally says that video game music is mediocre, to put it generously. And even he was like, wow, this actually might sound cool based on what you're describing. So, if you're a video game fan, I think you should still check it out. And if you're not a video game fan, I think even if you don't have the context of what's going on in the game, and you're not playing the platforming levels, you're still probably gonna have a blast. And since this is an indie soundtrack, you can bet that they won't be charging like $150 like Nintendo would. I know I keep putting down Nintendo in here, but it just goes to show you how these little itty-bitty companies with like 20 some odd people have like maybe not even half of the budget that big companies do, and yet they can have quality that a huge studio full of 300 people can't even manage. And I'm not just saying that because he sent it to me. All of this is my actual honest opinions. Even if I had never heard from M.R. Miller, and the Evergate team didn't bother seeing my review, I would have still said all of this, because it's my honest opinion that Evergate has the best soundtrack I've ever heard in a video game. And in some respects, I would even say it's the best soundtrack I've ever heard, like in any medium. It may not be the most memorable sounding soundtrack out there, But it definitely has its moments if you've actually played the game. You begin to appreciate all of the motifs. But I would say that it fits every box for what I generally think of when I think of an epic soundtrack. Like when I try to compose orchestras in my own head, not that I could actually make it into real music, I think, what is the most epic and joyful sounding? And Evergate, I would say, more or less perfectly comes to mind. So, if you haven't taken the hint by now, I highly recommend that you guys go out and buy the soundtrack. And I really hope that this game gets more attention, as it's so evenly priced, and this was Stone Lantern Games' first project. And of course, all the big name games are going to get advertised a lot more, so this will probably fall under the radar, but I'm sure indie lovers will eat it up no matter what. But if you're not an indie lover, I think this would be a great place to start. And this is coming from someone who doesn't generally like indie games, so the fact that I'm recommending an indie game is saying something. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching, my friends. If you have any comments, questions, critiques, or criticisms, please let me know. I'll make sure to leave a link to MR Miller's YouTube channel and also to his Twitter if you want to follow him for yourself, and also maybe stalk our Twitter conversations so you don't think that I'm just making all of this up. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and go get Evergate. Bye!